All right, for this project, we're going to be building a fireplace mantle. And unlike my few other mantles that I've built before, this is going to extend up 4 feet high and it's going to be 71 inches across. The fireplace is going to be only about, I don't know, maybe 3 feet or so in the middle. But the overall fireplace will be much larger than that and extend all the way to the floor. The fireplace is going to stick out about 5¼ inches from the wall, and it's also going to be about 5¼ inches wide all around. So let's get to it. And just like every project, I begin by cutting all my pieces to rough length at the miter station. I then bring over all my pieces freshly cut off the miter station over to my table saw, and because these boards are relatively flat, all I'm doing is simply knocking off all the rough edges from these boards. Then once that's done, I begin to mock up these pieces together to basically pick out the best sides of the boards before I begin assembly. And I like what I see. Now, I wanted to get a little fancy here, and I didn't have to, but I decided to use my Festool domino to, join these pieces together. Like I said, I didn't have to do that because these boards are relatively straight. Nevertheless, I find any good excuse to bust out the domino and use it. It's such a pleasure to use. There you can see the dominoes, and you can see how easy these pieces come together. As you can see, this fireplace mantle will be hollow in the middle. Up next on this shot is I'm going to cut the 45-degree angles for all the mitered cuts on this mantle. Now I do have a 12-inch miter saw, but as you can see here, it still wasn't big enough to cut through the entire piece there. You'll see here in the next shot. But it's okay, I busted out my trusty Japanese pull saw and knocked off the remainder. Here, I'm gonna set up the pieces. Again, I haven't used any glue yet, so all I'm doing is dry fitting all the pieces to make sure they come together nicely. And up next, you see me just taking everything apart, and on the inner bottom portion of this mantle, I'm going to take a couple of plywood pieces and join them together, which I'll then use to add support to the inner miter cuts. And all it's doing, it's going to make the 45-degree angles come together more securely. I took some 1¼ inch screws, a little bit of glue, and that's all I did. That's what I did for both sides. Now you'll see me laying here a couple of 2x4s, and that's only so I can prop up the entire fireplace mantle, because I do want to be able to use the clamps underneath without having to actually lift the entire piece. So this just basically gives me room to attach the clamps, is what I'm saying. Now here I'm getting ready for the glue up, and if you know about glue ups this size, it always makes me a little nervous because I have to work fairly quickly, especially because I do have these mitered edges. On this shot, here you see me just, adding the glue, inserting the dominoes, and then yeah, just putting it all together. It comes together like a puzzle. Alright guys, let me give you a quick update on the progress. Obviously I wasn't recording, so anyway, so I removed the clamps already. The glue is nice and set. I went ahead and did a few things. I used my trim router to trim and make all the edges nice and even, the inner side and the top side, sides and everywhere. I also took some wood filler, which I still haven't sanded down, but you can see I used a little bit of wood filler there, just to cover up all the imperfections. And up next, start sanding this whole thing down. Now, I did spend a lot of time sanding, but I'm gonna spare you the boredom and then just skip ahead. Up next, I added a piece of trim to the inner fireplace mantle, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just cutting up all the mitered corners so that they come together nicely when I join them, which essentially follows the mitered edge on the face of this mantle, so it gives it a nice look to it. There you see me dry fitting this piece, and then I bring over the other piece I cut, and it comes together very nicely. Once I have all three pieces cut, I have my son come out and help me bring out this fireplace mantle up to the table, and I simply attach it with some glue and a few screws from the inside out. So, and the stain I'll be using on this project is Colonial Maple. Here it is. And I typically don't like to stain these projects because, as you know, some of the stain can be a little smelly, but surprisingly this stain did not give off a terrible smell whatsoever, so it was a fairly enjoyable process, if you will. Up next is the delivery, and to secure it in place, I simply took some 2x3 material, and I used my hammer function on my drill and just simply drilled out the holes. I took some blue mason screws and secured it in with 4 screws, one on each corner, and that was more than enough to secure this anchor in place. And then of course I brought over the mantle and secured it in place with a few screws on the sides. And I didn't show it here, but I used similar color deck screws to kind of hide the screws. And of course on the bottom you see there's a gap, but that was by design. We ended up going or adding these caps on the bottom, which definitely gives it a finished look. And yeah, it turned out really good, and I'm really happy with the finished product. Hope you enjoy this video, guys, and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks.